My name is Sophia, and what I am about to share with you is something neither of us can afford to ignore. I am a 45-year-old professor of religious history based in Boston, Massachusetts. Prior to my near-death experience, I thought I had a solid understanding of the history of Christianity. However, on October 20th, 2024, Jesus himself revealed just how much we had misunderstood, or perhaps deliberately overlooked, the true history of the church. What I learned during that time completely shattered everything I thought I knew about Christianity. Before we begin, please take a moment to let me know where you're listening from. It would mean a lot to feel connected, even if we are physically apart. Also, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts about this near-death experience in the comments. Let's engage in a fair and open discussion so that we can all learn from one another. Thank you, and I hope you find this story as eye-opening as I did. The day started out like any other. I was on my way to campus to deliver a lecture on early Christianity, but on the highway, a semi-truck jackknifed on the slick, rain-soaked road. I still remember the terrible screech of metal, the chaos of the spinning world around me, and then peace, a peace so profound that it defies earthly description. Later, the doctors told me that I was clinically dead for 7 minutes and 23 seconds. Yet where I went during those minutes felt like eternity. The clarity of those moments is etched into my memory so deeply that even my most vivid earthly experiences seem pale in comparison. The transition was nothing like what I had imagined. There was no tunnel of light, no floating above my body. Instead, reality itself seemed to fold away, like pages being turned in a book, to reveal something far more real beneath it. The only way I can describe it is to say it felt like waking up from a dream, except in this case, our earthly life was the dream, and I was awakening into the ultimate reality. And then he appeared. Jesus stood before me, not as the serene figure seen in stained glass windows or classic paintings, but as an overwhelming presence, the embodiment of pure love and truth. His presence was both immense and deeply personal. His eyes radiated the wisdom of eternity, but there was also an unmistakable sadness in them. He was grieving over what his church had become. "Sophia," he said, "you've dedicated your life to studying the history of my church, but there is so much more you need to know, truths that have been hidden, forgotten, or misunderstood. Are you ready to see?" I could only nod, utterly speechless in the presence of such grandeur. What came next was beyond anything I could have imagined. A divine revelation that challenged every belief I held about the origins of Christianity. Jesus didn't merely tell me about the early church. He showed me. In an instant, we were there, witnessing events as they unfolded. The experience was far more vivid and real than any historical document or archaeological discovery could ever convey. I wasn't just observing. I was living these moments, feeling and understanding them with a clarity no earthly research could ever provide. The first shocking revelation came as Jesus showed me the very foundation of the church. We appeared in a humble room in Jerusalem where the apostles had gathered in the days following the crucifixion. What I witnessed directly challenged everything I had ever learned about the church's hierarchy and leadership. "Watch carefully," Jesus said, as we observed Peter standing among the apostles. "What do you see?" I watched, awestruck, as Peter, the man traditionally regarded as the first leader of the church, stood not as a dominant figure, but as one equal among his peers. The Pope participated in discussions as an equal among his brothers. Yes, he was respected and influential, but he did not act as the supreme authority we have been led to believe. Summoning the courage to ask, I managed, but didn't you make Peter the rock upon which you would build your church? Jesus' response was gentle, yet firm, filled with both compassion and clarity. I did say those words to Peter, he explained, but look closely at how they were understood at the time. He gestured toward the scene before us, where Peter was deeply engaged in conversation with James, John, and the other apostles. There was no sign of domination or supreme rule, only collaboration and shared faith. The rock was never about creating a hierarchy with Peter at its head, Jesus continued. It was about the strength of his faith and testimony, serving as one of many foundations for the community of believers. This revelation struck me deeply, unraveling one of the most central assumptions about the early church. The truth Jesus revealed was clear. The early church did not operate within the rigid hierarchical structure we know today. Instead, it was a diverse, thriving community of believers, each contributing their unique gifts. Leadership was not concentrated in one person or office. It was shared among many faithful disciples who worked together to spread Christ's message. The scene shifted, and suddenly Jesus and I were walking through the bustling streets of ancient Rome. The contrast was striking. From the modest gatherings in Jerusalem to the grandeur and power of the Roman Empire. The air was thick with incense, and the sounds of commerce and pagan worship echoed through the streets. Now, Jesus said, let me show you something that will challenge everything you've been taught about how my church became what it is today. I soon found myself witnessing one of the most profound and shocking truths about the early church, the true story of Constantine's conversion. It wasn't the simplified version often taught in Sunday schools, but a far more intricate and human tale. Watch closely, Jesus said, as we observed Constantine in his private chambers. What you're about to see has been misunderstood for centuries. I saw Constantine, the mighty emperor, not in a state of complete spiritual revelation, but carefully weighing the political advantages of adopting Christianity. The famous vision of the cross before battle was not as I had always imagined. Jesus showed me how this moment intertwined divine intervention with Constantine's calculated political ambitions. But isn't this wrong? I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. We've always been taught that Constantine's conversion was purely miraculous. Jesus' response profoundly affected me. My child, he said, did you think I could not work through human ambition to achieve divine purposes? Constantine's conversion was both political and spiritual, a perfect example of how I work through the complexity of humanity to fulfill my will. The realization struck me abruptly. The establishment of Christianity as the official religion of Rome was not solely a spiritual triumph, but also a calculated political move. This fusion of faith and politics forever changed the trajectory of the church. Then came what was perhaps the most startling revelation of all. Jesus took me to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. What I witnessed was nothing like the serene and orderly gathering I had always envisioned. Instead, the council was alive with passionate debates, political maneuvering, and even heated arguments over fundamental aspects of Christian doctrine. This, Jesus said, gesturing toward the animated scene, is where many of the doctrines you know today were formalized. But look at how human the process was. I stood in awe as I watched bishops passionately debate the nature of Christ's divinity, the structure of church authority, and the standardization of Christian practice. It was a mix of faith, reason, and human imperfection, a vivid demonstration of how divine truth was woven into the intricate tapestry of human history. Jesus turned to me with infinite compassion in his eyes, as if he could sense the shock and confusion I was feeling. Does it disturb you to see such human elements in the formation of church doctrine? He asked gently. Yes, I admitted, my voice trembling. I always thought, we've been taught that these decisions were purely the result of divine inspiration. Ah, Jesus said, a knowing smile softening his expression. But isn't it even more miraculous that I could work through such human processes to preserve my essential truths? The miracle isn't that these men were perfect. It's that, through their very human efforts, my message of love and salvation endured. Then, with a wave of his hand, Jesus showed me something that left me gasping in awe. We began traveling through the early Christian communities, witnessing their diverse practices and beliefs, some of which would be considered heretical today. I saw Gnostic Christians engaging in intricate spiritual rituals, emphasizing secret knowledge and complex hierarchies. I observed the Ebionites faithfully adhering to Jewish practices while interpreting Christ's teachings through their traditions. There were also countless house churches, each with its own unique understanding of Jesus' message. But which of these groups was right? I asked, struggling to reconcile what I was seeing. You're asking the wrong question, Jesus replied. His voice was patient, yet his words carried profound weight. What you are seeing is how my followers, in their sincere desire to understand, interpreted my teachings through their own cultural and spiritual lenses. The truth was gradually filtering through human comprehension, akin to light flowing through a prism. We moved forward in time, and I saw the church beginning to consolidate its power in Rome. But what Jesus revealed next challenged everything I had been taught. The decision to establish Rome as the center of the church was not solely a result of Peter's martyrdom there. Practical considerations of power, influence, and empire played an equally significant role. Watch, Jesus said, gesturing to the scenes unfolding before us. I saw early popes grappling with the immense challenge of balancing their divine calling with the earthly responsibilities of leadership. They navigated spiritual and temporal issues, often facing political pressures that shaped their decisions. I observed how the church's hierarchy evolved, borrowing administrative structures from the Roman Empire. Practices we consider unchanging traditions were gradually developed over centuries. The role of bishops, the power of the papacy, and the structure of church authority all emerged through complex and very human processes of decision-making and adaptation. But what about papal infallibility, I asked, struggling to reconcile these revelations. And apostolic succession? Aren't these fundamental to church authority? Jesus responded with a profound gentleness, his words both comforting and challenging. These doctrines developed over time as my followers sought to understand and organize my teachings. The authority is real, but it came through a process far more intricate than most people realize. One of the most shocking moments came when Jesus showed me how the New Testament was formed. I watched as early church leaders debated which gospels and writings should be included and which should be excluded. "See how they struggled?" Jesus asked as we observed their intense discussions. They were sincere in their desire to preserve truth, but the process was far more human than many today would like to believe. I stood, fascinated and unsettled, as I realized the weight of these decisions. Doctrine and practice were shaped by a combination of spiritual discernment, scholarly debate, and yes, political considerations. This, Jesus said, turning to me with an intensity that pierced my soul, is perhaps the most important truth I want you to understand. The human elements in my church's development do not make it less divine. They make it more miraculous. My message endured, not in spite of human imperfection, but through it. His words echoed in my heart, challenging and expanding everything I had ever believed about the church and its history, through all the complexities of human nature, through political pressures, cultural changes, debates, and even conflicts. My essential message of love and salvation has endured. The scenes continued to unfold before us. I witnessed the evolution of liturgy, the establishment of church calendars, the creation of feast days, and the observance of fasting periods. I began to understand how many practices Christians take for granted today actually emerged as a fascinating blend of spiritual inspiration and cultural adaptation. "But why are you showing me all of this?" I asked, struggling to comprehend the depth of these revelations. "Why reveal these complicated truths?" Jesus' response was both challenging and beautiful. "Because it is time for my followers to understand that faith is not about maintaining comfortable illusions. True faith can embrace both the divine and human aspects of my church's development. The real miracle is not that everything was perfect from the beginning. It's that through all these very human processes, my truth and love have continued to transform lives. As we moved through these revelations, Jesus showed me how the church navigated various crises and challenges. I witnessed periods of great turmoil, including times when multiple individuals claimed to be pope, and moments when political power seemed to overshadow spiritual authority. The church appeared to have lost its direction. "Notice," Jesus said, gesturing toward the unfolding events, "how even in the darkest times, there were always those who held to my true message of love and salvation. The institutional church might struggle, but my real church, the community of faithful hearts, has never failed." One of the most profound moments came when Jesus revealed the true nature of early Christian worship. We appeared in various house churches scattered across the Roman Empire. What I witnessed moved me to tears. "Look carefully," Jesus instructed, pointing to a small gathering in a Roman home. "See how different their worship was from what you know today." The scene was unlike anything I had imagined. Instead of structured services, these early Christians formed intimate groups, sharing meals that nourished both their bodies and spirits. Their prayers were heartfelt and spontaneous, genuine expressions of faith and community rather than formal recitations. The truth was shocking. Early Christian worship bore little resemblance to the structured services we know today. But when did it change? I asked, curiosity and disbelief evident in my voice. How did we go from this to what we have now? Jesus then led me on a journey through time, showing me the gradual transition of Christian worship from simple, intimate gatherings to formalized church services. I saw how shared, Meals became more ritualized. Spontaneous prayers gave way to structured liturgies, and house churches were eventually replaced by grand basilicas. Notice, Jesus said, how each change served a purpose at the time. As the community grew, they needed more structure. As persecution ended, they could worship more openly. But with each change, something was gained and something was lost. The revelations deepened as Jesus showed me the development of church doctrine. We witnessed the heated debates over Christ's nature at the Council of Nicaea, but now I see them with new eyes. These were not merely theological arguments. They were desperate attempts by sincere believers to grasp profound truths. Watch their faces, Jesus said, directing my attention to the council members. See the passion, the sincerity, but also the human limitations they struggled with. I saw how political pressures shaped their decisions, how cultural contexts influenced their choices, and how personal ambitions sometimes played a role in their outcomes. The realization was both humbling and enlightening. Despite this, I also witnessed how divine truth emerged, though filtered through human understanding. But here's what might shock you the most, Jesus said. The scene shifted again, and we found ourselves observing the early church leaders as they determined which texts would be considered scripture and which would not. The process was far more intricate and human than I had ever imagined. I watched them debate passionately, weighing the merits of various gospels and letters. I saw how some profound spiritual writings were excluded, not necessarily because they lacked truth, but because they did not align with the developing Orthodox understanding. I noticed how political and cultural factors subtly influenced decisions that were supposed to be purely spiritual. Why were some texts chosen and others rejected? I asked, seeking clarity. The process was both divine and human, Jesus explained. These leaders sincerely sought the truth, but they were also products of their time and culture. They made decisions based on their best understanding, guided by my spirit, yet limited by their human perspective. Then, a revelation nearly brought me to tears. Jesus showed me how the concept of papal authority evolved, not as a sudden transfer of power from Peter, but as a gradual development shaped by both spiritual needs and political realities. Watch carefully, he said, as we observe the stages of this evolution. See how the idea of papal supremacy grew over centuries, not days or years. I saw how the early bishops of Rome gradually gained influence, not only because of their spiritual leadership, but also due to political circumstances that elevated their authority. I witnessed theological arguments crafted to reinforce their growing power. It became clear that the concept of papal authority did not emerge fully formed. Its development was far more intricate than the simple narrative often told. But then, I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty, what does this mean for church authority today? Jesus responded with a profound statement. Authority in my church has always been real, but its expression has always been shaped by human understanding and circumstances. The miracle isn't that it was perfect from the beginning, but that through all these human processes, my truth has continued to guide and transform lives. As we delve deeper into these revelations, Jesus showed me something particularly challenging, my understanding of women's roles in the early church. I saw women serving as deacons, leading house churches, and playing vital roles in the spread of Christianity. Yet, Over time, their gradual exclusion from leadership became evident. Jesus revealed how this shift was not a divine mandate, but a human decision, heavily influenced by cultural norms of the time. This, too, is part of the story that needs to be understood, he said, his voice tinged with both sorrow and hope. See how human customs and prejudices affected my church's development. The revelations continued, each more startling than the last. I observed the practice of confession evolve from a public act of reconciliation within the community to the private penance we recognize today. I witnessed the understanding of the Eucharist transform over centuries, becoming more formalized and doctrinally defined. I saw concepts like purgatory and indulgences arise, not as arbitrary inventions, but as the result of complex interactions between theological reflection and cultural influences. If all of this is true, I asked, my voice heavy with the weight of these revelations, what does it mean for faith today? Jesus' reply was both challenging and comforting. The truth about my church's development does not weaken faith. It should strengthen it. Understanding how my followers, through their human imperfections, sought to preserve and spread, my message shows the resilience of my truth. The human elements do not make my church less divine. They make it more miraculous. For even through flawed people and processes, my love and salvation have endured, transforming lives for centuries. I work through human instruments with all their limitations and complexities, Jesus said, and that reveals the true miracle of my continued presence in the world. As my time with Jesus drew to an end, he revealed one final and profound vision to me. I witnessed the church's long journey through history, its struggles, triumphs, and pivotal moments. Within these moments, I saw both divine inspiration and human failure. Yet through it all, something remarkable stood out. A consistent, unbroken thread of God's love woven throughout human history. This, Jesus declared, is the greatest truth of all. My church has never been perfect because it is made up of imperfect humans. But through all its human elements, its struggles, debates, and even its mistakes, my message of love and salvation has endured. That is the real miracle. As the vision began to fade, I felt myself being drawn back into my body. But before it was over, Jesus spoke one final message to me. Share what you have seen, Sophia. Tell them that understanding the human aspects of my church's development does not diminish its divine nature. It reveals it. The true miracle is how I work through human beings in all their complexity to fulfill my purpose. I gasped awake in the hospital room, overwhelmed by the profound truth of what I had just experienced. The doctors called my survival a miracle, but I knew the real miracle lay in what Jesus had revealed to me about the true history of his church. Since that day, I have carried these revelations within me, knowing they do not undermine faith, but deepen it. The shocking truth about the early church is not that it was perfect. It wasn't. Instead, it is that God's truth and love have continued to transform lives, even through the church's human elements. That, to me, is the most profound lesson I learned from my experience. The church's human history does not detract from the divine mission. It enhances the miracle of its existence. Understanding how God works through human beings, despite their limitations, struggles, and complexities, reveals that faith is not about clinging to comforting illusions, but about embracing the beautiful, complex reality of how God operates in the world. I share this testimony not to challenge anyone's faith, but to strengthen it. Jesus revealed these truths to me to demonstrate that God's work in the world is far greater than we can imagine, not because it is perfect, but because it weaves divine guidance and human struggle into one extraordinary tapestry. Before you leave, I want to emphasize this. Everything Jesus showed me is consistent with historical evidence, while also providing a deeper spiritual understanding of how these events unfolded. He did not show me a simplified or sanitized version of church history. Instead, he revealed its full complexity, the reality of how divine purpose works through human agency to build his church. My near-death experience is more than just a recounting of history. It is a testimony to how God operates through human beings and institutions to fulfill his divine purpose. And that, I believe, is the most important truth of all.